Welcome to the Altarian Triad by Jamie Lee Woodman. Chapter 2. Planet Earth. Randel slowly and painfully opened his eyes. Everything was blurry, and it took him a moment to focus. Eventually, things started to take shape. It's an odd sensation watching blood drip from your hands, especially when you're not expecting to see such a thing. The blood was also on his new black jeans. He wasn't a person who often bought new clothing, especially as expensive as those pants. That's why he was more alarmed by the damage to his attire than his bleeding. His perspective on this would eventually change. As his consciousness drifted in and out, Randel noticed a flickering of red and blue. He couldn't tell which direction it was coming from. He just knew that such lights were never a good sign. Becoming aware of an increased headache, he thought for a brief second that those pesky lights might have been the cause of his pain. Then it dawned on him. He was in trouble. Mild tinnitus, present since Bolovich had woken, became louder and more invasive until it finally consumed all other senses. He reached for his head and squinted his eyes, attempting to push the pain away. It was as if his brain was trying to squeeze through his eye sockets in the crudest way possible. Then, from his perspective, it all disappeared. It hadn't. Randel had just passed out and reawakened. Feeling sick and disorientated, he attempted to move with little success. He was limp, numb, and in shock. Although his body appeared free, he couldn't feel his legs. It also felt as though something was pushing him to the left. Attempting to grasp his surroundings, he shook his head and blinked his eyes rapidly to clear the haze. It was partially successful as things began to clear, though simultaneously, the world spun uncontrollably. He was going to throw up. He prepared for the inevitable evacuation, blacking out before it occurred. Moments later, his eyes reopened, and the haze returned. Randel couldn't distinguish the noises around him. Separating the sounds required too much concentration. While attempting to focus on what he needed to do next, his attention was rudely interrupted by a person shining white light into his eyes. Immediately, Bolovich closed his eyelids to block out the intensity. His focus only shifted when he heard a slow booming noise from the same annoying person. It was a muffled voice that he couldn't decipher. While attempting to concentrate, he was interrupted by an unknown panic that entered his heart. He received a flashback of himself hitting his head. Consciousness slipped his grasp once more. An abrupt bump from behind broke Bolovich's slumber. He attempted to turn his head without success. This increased his anxiety. Confused and unaware, he took a deep breath to calm his nerves. He attempted to ground himself. From what he could gather, it was nighttime and he was in a car. He wondered if it was his. He forced his hazy gaze towards the rearview mirror. It was slanted but still attached. Dangling from it was a miniature model of an Egyptian pyramid in Giza. It was a place he'd planned to go one day. At one point, he considered this symbol a good luck charm. Who knows? Maybe it saved his life. He couldn't tell if luck was on his side. All he knew was that the pyramid was an ornament from his car. He could only conclude that he'd been driving and had a crash. This knowledge naturally upset him. Still nauseous, Randel began to wiggle around. His seatbelt was constricting his movements. In a sudden panic, he attempted to free himself. It didn't work. If anything, he'd made it tighter. His dexterity was weak, hindering his attempt to escape. The increase in adrenaline created faster gasps for air, leading him to hyperventilate. His mind questioned what he had done to deserve this and if he would die. Coldness washed over his face, but before fainting, he saw a blurry outline of a person to his right. I want you to listen to me. You're safe, and I'm here to help you. Can you keep your eyes open? The female voice of reason sounded strangely familiar and muffled, as if spoken from underwater. Randel focused on each word, which helped him stay conscious and calm. Doing as instructed, he kept his eyes open. He attempted to look to his right to see the person speaking to him, though he still couldn't move his neck. It was irritating. It's okay. Calm down. We've put a neck brace on you. That's why you can't look from side to side. It's just precautionary at this stage. I want you to keep your head still, okay? Randel attempted to nod, then felt like an outright git for taking only a split second to disobey the person trying to assist him. Unable to see the woman, he figured she was standing beside him, outside the car. Wanting to focus on something, he looked towards the broken windscreen and the blood on the dashboard. Seeing this wasn't good for him, he began to slip away. Hey, stay with me, the female voice demanded. I've just given you something to help with the pain. You'll feel a bit disorientated, though this is normal. Are you with me? Randel tried to nod again, accidentally. He wanted to cringe, but then he became giddy and nonchalant. The voice spoke no lies. He didn't feel as nauseous anymore, and his pain began to fade. He felt weird. What he assumed to be a female paramedic leaned in through the side window to look directly at her patient. Due to the glare of the lights and the proximity of the woman's face to his own, it was hard to determine what she looked like. He was able to catch a waft of perfume. It was the smell of youth mixed with a calming natural scent. Not wanting to stare, he redirected his attention to the pyramid. As the paramedic adjusted Randel's neck brace, a blonde ponytail fell in front of his face, tickling his nose. She then wiped his eyes with a cloth. When the fabric was pulled back, it was completely covered in blood. "Aha," she mumbled. "How is your eyesight now?" The weary driver saw double vision until things began to align as they should. Then, he became amazed. Randel was unsure if the paramedic could see his surprise, yet if this were a cartoon, his eyes would have popped out of his head. "It can't be," he thought. "It's not possible." He stared directly at the paramedic and wondered how the woman from his dream had appeared in real life. "You okay, champ?" she questioned jokingly. "Yes. Sorry," Randel replied shyly. "You're okay. I'm a paramedic. My name's Amy. My colleague helping me today is Ben." This was followed by a hi in the background. "Can you please tell me your full name?" Desperate to please, Randel replied immediately. "Randel Bolovich," she squeezed out. "Great. Now Randel, do you know what happened to you tonight?" "No." "Was I in a car crash?" 10 points, yelled Ben from the back. "Correct," Amy confirmed politely before giving a rude glance to her partner for the inappropriate comment. "But I'm happy to say that it looks like you've sustained minimal injuries minus the nasty knock to the head. It's important to note that due to the impact, your legs are trapped. We'll have someone to help with this soon. Until then, just lie back and relax. There's a chance you'll come out of this mostly unscathed, which is saying a lot given the state of your car. Anyway, we'll drive you to the hospital once you're free. Do you understand?" "Yes." Amy could have told Randel that he'd have to carry his head around in a jar for the rest of his life, and he wouldn't have batted an eyelid. He was immersed in the woman's beauty. "Randel, do you have anyone we can call to meet you at the hospital?" When asked this question, Bolovich felt a slight shame. He had nobody. There was no real friend or partner in his life. It was just him. He didn't even have a cat. He struggled, attempting to find an answer that would justify this. "No," he replied, attempting to say more without words exiting his mouth. His mind went blank and he lost the energy to speak further. Eventually, he accepted that the one-word response would have to do. "Okay, no problem," Amy replied. "So I'm going to walk you through the situation, okay? Your car was impacted on both sides, meaning all your doors are jarred. This is part of the reason you can't move your legs. To open the driver's side, I'll need to leave you for a moment and let some nice people use a device to remove the door. It might sound and feel scary, but don't worry, it's completely safe. I'll be standing close by to intervene if there are any problems. Do you understand?" Randel squeezed out a noise that was meant to be a yes. It was enough for the paramedic to give the other workers the go-ahead. A woman in a work vest approached the car. First, she removed bolts from the door hinges and then attached a large clamp. Randel wondered if it was called the Jaws of Life. He had read an article about it in a magazine at the dental clinic. Despite being very straightforward, the worker was very nice. As she did her job, she told Randel how lucky he was before discussing the football scores and squeezing in some political chit-chat. She didn't ask any questions. It was all a distraction tactic that was, although obvious, welcomed. A buzzsaw sliced some of the door. It was obscenely loud and produced sparks. During this, the workwoman couldn't talk. It was unnerving for Bolovich, yet before long, it was done. The car shook before the clamp removed the driver's side door entry. Cold air rushed through the car. It was surprisingly refreshing. Randel, who wasn't aware he was holding his breath, began to breathe freely once more. He looked up at the pyramid one last time, wondering what had happened to his life. He had almost died, and he had barely lived. It was natural to feel that if he survived this, he would finally do something memorable or worthwhile. To his dismay, the other paramedic, Ben, had taken over most of the ongoing work. The medium-sized gent with black scruffy hair tested Randell's leg movements to see if anything was broken. It was painful. Ben would later advise that pain was good and feeling nothing was bad. Randel took his word for it. "Okay, buddy, I want you to listen to me." Ben, who sounded very young, started to explain what would happen next. "I have Amy beside me. Together, we'll slowly take you out of the car. Between your nasty concussion and the drugs, you'll be unable to stand, which is why we need you to relax and go limp. I will carry your legs while Amy carries you from under your arms. We will be laying you on a stretcher beside the car. Do you understand?" "Yeah," Randel said, while feeling an extra hit from the medication going through his system. Both paramedics took their time getting into position. They attempted a few different ways of holding their patient before settling on what was best for everyone. Randel found it impressive that they were so calm. After a count to 3, Randel was moved sideways before being lowered onto the stretcher. Having Amy's arms around his body would have felt nice if not for her hands digging into his bruises. Regardless, her head above his, although upside down, was heavenly. The stretcher was then raised before he was carted off towards the ambulance. He couldn't see the damage he was leaving behind. It was probably for the best. Once loaded into the vehicle, Ben closed the doors and made his way to the driver's seat. For the briefest of moments, Amy and Randel were alone. Unable to look anywhere except towards the ceiling, Bolovich was surprised to see the woman of his dreams stand over him, smile, and then tap his chest 3 times without explanation. As Ben got inside, Randel's mind began to wander. He felt he needed to say something to Amy, though he didn't know what. Between the trauma, his grogginess, and the drugs, he finally managed to say, "You were in my dreams." Amy blushed before looking up at Ben, who was grinning ear to ear. "I think that's enough drugs for you, mate," Ben gestured. Ben drove towards the hospital as Amy continued to monitor Randel's vitals in the back of the ambulance. She was continuously moving. Bolovich remained silent due to his little faux pas. He felt like a complete moron. As an introvert, he knew he'd stew over this for a long time. While others could drop something so small and insignificant, he needed to think things through, build it up in his mind, feel horrible about it for years, and then finally move on to another mistake he'd inevitably make. So, Randel, did you also see me in your dreams? Was I clothed? Ben joked from the front of the ambulance. He'd clearly been trying to come up with something funny for the last 5 minutes of the ride. The thought of him being a dimwit was enough to keep Randel's confidence from completely dissipating. The rest of the trip was torturous. Randel pictured Amy and Ben in a bar at the end of the night, laughing about the slip of words. It was embarrassing. He was also scarred, physically and emotionally. For him, this incident was in line with his life's direction. Although it felt like a lifetime, the trip to the hospital was quick. When parked, Ben exited the vehicle and came around to the back. While alone, Amy tapped her patient 3 times on the chest once again. "Hey, things will turn out all right. You'll see," she comforted. Bolovich wanted those words to have more meaning than they did. Soon, she would be out of his life, and he would have to return to his pointless existence, a thought he couldn't bear to think about in his condition. The rest of the night was a blur. Randel was rolled out of the ambulance and into the hospital on the stretcher. Not able to look left or right with his neck brace, he could only watch the lights flash above as he went down the hall. After being transferred to a waiting bed, he prayed he'd get to see Amy again. He just wanted one last glimpse of the woman who was literally from his dreams. And then, finally, he got his wish. Ben looked over him first and said, "Good luck, champ," before Amy moved her head into view and smiled. "You take care of yourself." Although those words were plain and simple, they meant the world to him. Randel would be left in that same hallway for a couple of hours until a permanent bed became available. When he was conscious enough, he did his best to avoid thinking about his mundane life and the crappy 9-to-5 job he despised. Instead, he thought of Amy. She was the bright light in his dark and dull life.
For me, princess, hold up your favorite drink.